Hello, movie lovers. Today I'm going to continue on with my exploration of the films of 1972, 50 years ago. And it's been an interesting journey so far. I've done westerns, I've done black cinema, and now I'm going to do a really daunting task for me, which is to talk about six films that I labeled European auteurs, the art house, the European art film in 1972, which was a big deal. Many of the art films would be shown in movie theaters that would normally show much more commercial fare. Of course, in those days, that was pretty big because we only had one screen movie theaters. This was well before the multiplex came along. And certainly there were some big names, and one of them right here, Federico Fellini, was probably as famous a director as there was, even in the US. He was really acclaimed in the United States. I'm sure he was around the rest of the world. But he became a name that, you know, an average person would know. Some people would know Ingmar Bergman, but when you'd say it, the name, they would often say, "Oh, you mean Ingrid Bergman?" And Louis Buñuel too, right here. He also, in this era, he had probably the best late career of any great film director. His films, including his 1972 one, played in first-run movie theaters, and again, that would mostly show commercial films of Hollywood type films. But this is a difficult task for me because I'm instinctively adverse to the idea of genius in filmmaking. I don't worship directors like most people do. And even in 1972, I probably was always a big Hitchcock fan from the time I was a kid, but I certainly I didn't idolize him after I read some biographies about him, and also read two biographies of Federico Fellini, which sort of, he was such a narcissist, a bully on the set, the kind of person that doesn't appeal to me, but that's not to deny any evidence of making some very interesting and I'd even say brilliant films. So we're going to have Buñuel, we're going to have Erich Romer, we're going to have Rainer Werner Fassbinder, and I also have Bergman and a Bertolucci movie, Last Tango in Paris, but it's going to be a tough one. So I'm always afraid with great directors who have a large cadre of worshipers, people that just, love his genius. I'm always afraid I'm going to say something that's going to be offensive, and who am I to say who is great and who is not? And so in 1972, I was much more a critic. Nowadays, I'm much more of an enthusiast. I like to engage with the movies. I don't see my role as a moviegoer as somebody who needs to be judge and jury and cast my verdict, on movies. So it's interesting for me to revisit, because I saw most of the movies that I'm talking about and going before and going forward, I've seen in 1972. So it's interesting to see how your perspective changes. And let me tell you, your perspective, as you grow older, your perspective changes immensely. And it's one of the interesting things, maybe the only interesting thing about getting old, is that your perspective seems to be a little bit more clear-eyed, I think might be the word you'd say as you grow older. Hopefully it is, because hopefully you've learned a lot in life. But today I'm going to talk about the Fellini film from that box set, and this is the Blu-ray contained within that box set that Criterion brought out in, I think it was around November of 2020. And it is available. Roma is one of the films that is available in that set that you can get as a single title. And in America, though, it was known as Fellini's Roma. even though the Criterion doesn't include his name in the title. His name was also, I believe, included in Satyricon when it was released in the U.S. So Fellini was the name. You know, he was more important than the film as far as the selling points went, and perhaps even in his own mind. And Roma is a series of anecdotes. Some are anecdotes, some longer sequences, very personal. Fellini's memory, his fantasies, his dreams, and even his beliefs, and very much a story of Rome, both past and present. We're always confronted with the idea that we are in a city that has a very long history of antiquity, monuments of antiquity, along with a new world in 1972. So there's no stars, there's no traditional narrative. Narrative is dispensed with altogether. Fellini, some might say, I think in 1972, I would think, my thoughts were probably that, you know, can he tell a story anymore? Is this going to be it? And there's no, in this movie, unlike, say, La Dolce Vita, which really was the beginning of Fellini's anecdotal kind of approach to making films, there at least was a through line. We had Marcello Mastroianni to sort of ground us as we go from anecdote episode to episode. But there's nevertheless some terrific sequences in Roma. One of them is set in a music hall, a variety show for the lower classes, and Fellini was a big admirer of this type of entertainment. And it reminds you a little bit of Variety Lights, the first film he co-directed with Alberto Lattuada. It's a riotous atmosphere. They heckle, the people in the audience heckle the performers. They harass them unmercifully. They fight amongst each other. And it's all broken up, because this is 1944, by a bombing raid where they all have to go to shelter. And we're reminded both here in earlier episodes of fascism and of Mussolini. Another episode, we follow a crew into a subway, a film crew into a excavation for a subway that's being built underneath Rome. And when they get to the point where the drilling is going on, the crew has discovered a cavern, and when they drill a hole to get to an empty cavern, the instruments pick up, and when they go there, it's an ancient villa with frescoes on the wall. Here we get the cinematography of Giuseppe Rutano, and he's just absolutely, I mean, he's the look of this film is absolutely beautiful. Rutano, of course, was the cinematographer on The Godfather the same year, 1972. And Danilo Donati, I have to mention him, is the production designer. Just amazing, and especially his designs for the ecclesiastic fashion show. And this is the most famous sequence from Roma, where we have a cardinal and a giant retinue of priests and prelates and also seemingly aristocrats. There's a princess, and they watch this fashion show of clerical garb for priests, for nuns, for bishops. And some of them are on roller skates, some ride bikes. It's really an amazing set, an amazing set design, especially in the end of that, where the Pope himself comes out. And I think, I'm a little bit unclear, but I think this was the Pope from World War II, who was sort of involved with the fascists, but he's revered by these people. They're just brought to tears. And in the supplements, we learn that some of the people in the technical crew and the people involved with it, they also broke out into tears. the expense that must have been, I didn't read, I couldn't find anything about how expensive this movie was, but this set must have cost a small fortune. I mean, it really, you see it on the screen. It is amazing. And then the ending too. And again, this is all visual stuff. There's really no spoilers here to be given because the power of the film is in the visual stylization. But there's a motorcycle, kind of, it's described in the commentary as a ballet, and at nighttime, there must be, 30 motorcycles, perhaps even more, but we just see their headlights, and they're taking sort of a tour of Rome, and then they go off into the distance. And so another great sequence. But then there's some that not so great, and I think the nadir is the 3 brothels sequences. We don't have just one, we got to have 3. And here, Fellini's tendency to be cartoonish, he did start out as a cartoon, a drawer of cartoons, and the characters of the prostitutes, it's so exaggerated, it's grotesque. I mean, it just goes on, and I've never cared for this part of Fellini because he constantly, in all his films, he gives you these grotesque visions, not just of prostitutes, but basically of people in general. People with unusual faces. And he really loved morbidly obese people. Yeah, and so everywhere in the film, in all his films, this pops up, this unattractiveness. But why he needed 3 brothel sequences, I know, having read a couple biographies of Fellini, I know that he was in his real life obsessed with prostitutes as well. And it's funny because I forget where it was pointed out, where I read that the only good-looking person in the film is the Fellini surrogate, who does pop up in a few of the sequences in the music hall sequence and in his arrival into Rome. This is it's not explicitly Fellini, but it suggests Fellini coming from the provinces to Rome as a young man, and he's dressed impeccably in white. He's got the Fellini's signature hat. Really good-looking guy, an American actor. Didn't speak any Italian. But I think in all, this is a film about spectacle. Now, Fellini, I don't know if it was his previous film, but his previous film in this particular box set, this Fellini box set there, was Satyricon. And I couldn't stand Satyricon. When I saw it, I was so bored with it. But it does have spectacle to it. And it does actually have some sort of story to it, but I was so bored with it. I liked it a little bit better. That's my opinion from 50 years ago. I liked it a little bit better. I was a little bit more entranced by the spectacle. But again, everybody is grotesque looking with, exaggerated makeup. And so the spectacle is really sort of the subject of the movie. It becomes like, wow, there's no storyline. Whatever dialogue is just that's in the film is really banal. We do get some cameos. One is from Gore Vidal, who pontificates. This is that sort of in a dinner sequence. And Fellini is sort of talking to him, and he pontificates about, the fall of Rome. Then we get Anna Mignani with a really brief cameo where she says, get some sleep. She doesn't want to be interviewed. She goes in her door. She's outside her apartment. She goes in, no, I don't want to talk. Get some sleep, Federico. And this was Anna Mignani's last appearance in a film. She died 2 years later. So then we get a commentary by Frank Burke, and all these elements were on the single Roma Blu-ray. Frank Burke has written a book on the films of Federico Fellini, and it's a brilliant commentary, but very academic. He finds meaning in every shot. Fellini represents this represents that. It kind of reveals sort of the the gap, I think, between watching a film, especially for a general audience, and studying a film. You can study a film, and he attributes so much genius to Fellini that you wonder, could Fellini actually have meant all these things that Frank Burke comes up with? But nevertheless, you know, I mean, I'm a general. I'm not a academic by any means, and I'm kind of glad I'm not as far as films go. But I love to read and listen to academic studies of movies because, you know, even though I'm somewhat dubious of this continual genius of an artist, this all-encompassing view, kind of worshiping of an artist, nevertheless, Frank Burke really does come up with some terrific insights along the way, and he presents this material just brilliantly. And there's a couple of interviews, one with a poet who is a friend of Fellini. He gives his ideas on Fellini and Roma in particular, very good interviewee. And then one with Paolo Sorrentino, who is a modern contemporary filmmaker, very much influenced by Fellini, and he also gives a very good comments on Fellini's influence, not just on cinema in general, but himself in particular. So next up, I think I am going to be doing, what is my next one? Oh, it will be Last Tango in Paris. I don't have that up there. Last Tango is going to be a problematic film. Hopefully I can talk about it in some sort of comprehensive and way and say something interesting about it. It was a film I did not like in '72, and I haven't watched it. I rewatched it recently, so that's going to be interesting for me. Okay, thanks a lot for everybody who managed to listen to me. I do appreciate it. Comments are welcome. Take care.